Welcome back to the Metal Command podcast here right after the break. Tony here with you, and let's get into an album review. So I'm going to talk about a band who put out their brand new debut album back in July. The band is called Nefarious, and it is comprised of various members and former members of some pretty significant metal bands. So many of you who watched the program remember I had Doug Piercy and Rick Hunolt on the show, both of the guitar players in this band. I had Doug, obviously, many of you know from the band Heathen, Blind Illusion, and of course a local band out in the Bay Area called Anvil Chorus. You have Rick Hunolt, many of you remember him from Exodus, and that interview will be in the show notes. And the interview was a lot of fun. We talked about a lot of really cool stuff. We talked about this album, a little bit of history, talked about a little musical history, some of our favorite guitar players and musicians, and it was an incredible interview. It really was a lot of fun. It felt like I was sitting in the rehearsal room where those guys rehearse at, and we were just hanging out as friends, talking music. So it was a really fun interview. The vocalist in the band is Keaton Tapania from Hyrax. Many of you know him from there. Tom Gears is the bass player. Tom, of course, many of you know from Blind Illusion. And Will Carroll, the drummer from Death Angel, is the drummer in this band. So many people consider this a sort of supergroup because you have a lot of people from a lot of these very relevant heavy metal bands or people that played in some relevant bands. And at the time of the interview that I did with Doug and Rick, I had only heard 2 songs off of the album. Maybe I think the third single might have just come out. So I had only heard 3 singles. Now, as I referenced before, the interview with myself, Doug, and Rick, it felt like I was sitting in their rehearsal room, and their first video was them, basically playing in their rehearsal room. And that's the kind of vibe that this band has and that the album has. But I had not heard the album at the time of the interview. So now I have listened to the entire album. So far the first couple of songs that I had heard, I thought were pretty solid. I think One Nation Enslaved was great, actually. But now we have an entire album to listen to and to talk about. Folks, normally when you have these supergroup type situations or former members of other significant bands or current members of these bands, when they get together to make an album, typically the project is overhyped. It typically underdelivers. The expectations get very, very high, and the reviews tend to be not good. It's just how it happens. It happens a lot. There are so many projects out there that I can tell you about that, that this has happened. The other thing that typically happens is, in many cases, most people don't like these albums as much as they, like the bands these guys are either in or came from. So many of you remember when I talked about the brand new single, when the song One Nation Enslaved, and that came out, I talked about how good the song was. I thought it was great. And this album is pretty good, especially for a debut album from a bunch of guys that really hadn't really played in bands together for any significant amount of time. It is what it is. If I were to describe it, so a lot of people are thinking, is this going to be a thrash metal album? For those of you that have not heard it, it does have a lot of thrash elements in it. However, it has more of a new wave of British heavy metal vibe as well. It has a kind of a combination of both. And I thought that combination is quite interesting because usually when you get bands like this together, you're going to have a bunch of rehashed thrash metal. I mean, that's typically what most people would expect, but it's not really like that. It has more of a stripped down new wave of British heavy metal vibe meets thrash. That could have a lot to do with, maybe Doug playing a lot of these Angel Witch songs that he had been playing live. But I got to be honest, I think it's a very strong debut album. I think it's pretty good. I think that when you get these guys together to make a record like this. Kind of more, it felt like the way it was described in the interview. This album just sort of happened. People got together, started writing songs, and then it just turned into a record. It just sometimes happens like that. But the cool thing about the album itself is that when you listen to it, it feels like all of these guys have been playing together, all 5 of them, for a very, very long time. Now, that could have a lot to do with the fact these guys are very seasoned musicians, but nevertheless, when I went to listen to the first song, Mere Death, on the album, which I had not heard until I was actually given the full-length album, I really liked it. It was cool. It's definitely different from the singles that came out. But the album definitely has this new wave of British heavy metal meets thrash metal vibe. And it doesn't have like the polished, super polished Andy Sneap production to it. But it doesn't really need that. And the songs, are they anything, are these guys reinventing the wheel? No. But the songs are fun. And it's a cool record. It's a good record. Rick and Doug, and I said this in the interview with them, they sound like they've been playing guitar together in a band for a couple decades. Now, that could be the fact that they just came from the same scene and played the same, kind of music coming up. Many of the same influences. We did talk about a lot of guitar players that influenced both of them. But nevertheless, this is a good album. I like it. And usually when I know I like an album is when I just find myself going to it a lot. And that is what this album has done, for me as far as a listener. Now, let me talk about another aspect about this record that I think is very, very good. And I think really, I think the reason I think it's good is because this record has something that a lot of these other kinds of projects don't have. Really good vocals. So when it comes to these bands, these supergroup bands that get together, a lot of times one of the biggest problems I have, especially with some of these thrash guys when they put some of these projects together, the vocals suck. Well, folks, this Nefarious album, the vocals are incredible. Caton DePena killed it on this album. He sounded incredible. And I think one of the things that sets this project apart from a lot of other projects or bands that a lot of the contemporaries of these guys have put together, the vocals really help the songs. The songs are good, but you need the right vocalist. And I think getting Caton to sing on this was definitely the right move for these guys. And he sings in sort of a style that you normally don't hear from him, in his other band. And we did elaborate on that in the interview. This is the interview segment with Rick and Doug where they talk about Caton's vocals. Check out this clip. Yeah, one of the things, too, I think that you picked the right singer for the tracks as well. And,
I'll tell you something about Caton. Caton is, when we brought him up here the first time, we gave him 150% freedom to do whatever he wanted. Mm-hmm. He came in with an empty slate. He barely even heard the songs he was about to sing on. And he barely even had read any of the lyrics. He just came up and honestly did a really, really, really fine job. He's never sung like this before. It's kind of like a new Caton, you know what I mean? And we gave him free reign.
Yeah. He had, one of the interesting things is that he has a little bit more of a, there's certain parts of the songs that he uses kind of more of his melodic side of his singing voice.
Oh, just wait till you hear the rest.
Yeah. I think that really, that's kind of what blew me away, because I've never really heard him sing the way that he does on these 2 tracks, at least so far that have come out. And I think that it fit really well with the music.
Yep.
Well, that's just kind of like how the production style went, I mean, I had most of the lyrics figured out, like the Addicted to Power song. I think that was the first one we did. or was it? I don't
With
remember.
Caton? With
Yeah,
Caton?
yeah, and I already
one was
had the lyrics
Coronation.
already written, and I had kind of an idea how to do the vocals lines, but I wasn't really fully sure, of the melody and all that. I mean, that one we actually demoed with another singer, so I did have actually a relatively reasonable, idea of where the direction could go. But then that's where what Rick said is absolutely true. I just showed Caton how we were doing it, and I go, look, take it from here and run with this ball. It's like the quarterback throws the ball out to the tight end of the the wide receiver or the running back, and he'll go and run, and he'll come up with some interesting variations of the same thing, and that's where the gold is because
Mhm.
he would take he would take, I mean, he would kind of like not really be sure where to start. And I go, well, here's a starting point. Why don't you just take it and see what you can do with this and run with it? And that's when the magic would happen. So that happened a whole bunch of times, pretty much on every song. We
Yeah.
Yeah.
would do this procedure. At first, weren't really sure how to do it, and he was a little nervous. But then it didn't take too long for all the ice was broken and it was all easy. And we're just laughing and having a good time. And we were trying out stuff, and then he'd go back home and we'd all listen, and then he'd come back the next weekend and we would like fine tune some parts that were good, but both of us would have some ideas on how to proceed with it. And Tom was sitting there engineering, like we did most of the recording of the vocals at Tom's house. And so Tom would run he runs his studio, and I'd sit there and help Kate out with the lyrics and just how to approach the song and just watch as the magic comes out, and it was pretty cool.
I honestly think that Caton surprised himself at times too. I could feel it when I was there. I was like, wow, dude, that's really badass. Because he's never sang like that before. He did a really good job, but we gave him free reign and just to be Caton. And I think he's happy with the finished product.
Sure.
Yeah, I realized he could kind of go in the direction of Bruce a little bit, Bruce Dickinson, that this sort of an approach, but he's still heavier with a lot of this kind of old school metal vibe.
Yeah.
But then he has elements of singing capabilities very similar in some ways to like what Bruce would do. So I just kind of kept thinking in that direction and helping him along with that,
Yeah.
and then letting him run with it,
Plus, he's
and
got so much
it was
experience.
awesome.
He's got a lot of experience with phrasing and he's got a lot of experience in metal.
Yeah.
Period. So he knows what he's doing. He's a pro.
Okay, so that's Rick Hunolt and Doug Piercy talking about Kate and DePena's vocals on this new, brand new debut album by the band Nefarious. And, I think it's cool. I think they did a tremendous job allowing Caton to just do his thing. And I think that added a lot to these songs. These guys, when you listen to the interview, they talked about just trying to make the songs better. There was no ego. There were no egos involved. There was no nonsense or drama involved. These songs sort of evolved by guys coming in and doing things to make them better. And it definitely shows for a debut record from 5 guys that never jammed all together in a band before. I got to be honest. I think it's a good record. And I'm in, one of the things that you always think of is what's the next album going to sound like? What are these guys going to come up with? One of the things that I like about this record a lot too is that it sounds more organic. It doesn't sound like too constructed. It's probably the best adjective I can use for that. There's nothing fake about it. I mean, these guys just went in, jammed these songs out, refined them. There was no major, huge process and, going through and making this record. It was just kind of a natural record. It just came to them. When you talk about how the whole band came together, that's how it happened. It just naturally happened that way. It's weird. There was no it didn't feel like there was like an intention. Hey, let's start a band to do this project. It just kind of happened. But you get that feel from this record. So to be honest, I think it's a great solid debut album. These guys, are they reinventing the wheel? No, but they don't have to. Guys like Rick and Doug are people that helped invent the scene, that were part of it, that were part, even though, these guys aren't in Metallica or any of these huge bands, they were part of the Bay Area scene. They were part of helping to develop its sound. They were a part of it. They helped invent it. And they've written, it's really about good songs in the end. And that's what this record has. Mere Death, I talked about the first song on the album. You obviously have the title track, Addicted to Power. That was one of the singles. It's a great track. One Nation Enslaved was the single. That's the last song in the album. In fact, that song is actually probably one of my favorites, probably my favorite on the album. And then you have a song called Together We Rise, which I think is probably my favorite on the album. So, yeah, probably my favorite. And then One Nation Enslaved to be a close second. So, good record. Good debut album. If you want to check it out, obviously, I will have a link in the show notes to check the record out. Go to the band's website. But there is an interview with myself, Rick Hunolt, and Doug Piercy. Again, incredible record. Those guys are really cool. I think for a debut album, they really hit home. They really did hit a home run with it. And I can't wait to hopefully see another record down the road. But other than that, these are my thoughts on the debut album by Nefarious. Hey everybody, Tony here from the Metal Command podcast. Again, I appreciate your support. Since 1998, I have hosted this show in one form or another, starting off in radio and now in the podcast format. Again, thanks for watching, and if you like what you see and hear on this show, by all means, please hit the subscribe button, hit the little bell to be notified anytime I do post a video, and if you see this program on any other form of social media, please give me a follow there. Again, I always appreciate your support.